Good morning. My name is Dr. Joan Reed. I'm Dean for Diversity and Community Partnership at Harvard Medical School and Professor of Medicine. Thank you for joining us in today's career development session hosted by the Harvard Medical School Office for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Partnership in partnership with our Harvard Medical School affiliated offices of diversity and inclusion. Career development sessions provided our junior faculty, our clinical fellows, research fellows, and administrators, as well as alumni of our fellowship programs with information and skills needed for professional and career advancement. I want to start by saying thank you to Dr. Landry and Dr. Mueller for presenting and facilitating today's session. Be your own advocate for career advancement, moving beyond imposter syndrome and self-sabotage. I'd also like to give a special thanks to our diversity affiliates committee members, Maxine Milstein, Tina Gelissimo, Nicole Tinneman, Sandra Ordonez Pina, and Teresa Carter for their recommendations on topics and speakers for this year's career development session. Thank you for your contributions. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. This meeting is being recorded. It's on Zoom. So please make sure that you are muted and turn off your video during the presentation. You can submit your questions using the chat function or using reaction function to raise your hand. When answering presenters' questions, please unmute yourself. The recording will be made available on the DICP website, and there will be a short poll at the end, so please stay on to answer those few questions. It takes less than a minute. It's now my pleasure to introduce today's speakers, Dr. Alden Landry and Dr. Stephanie Mueller. Dr. Landry is an emergency medicine physician at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center and is founder of Motivating Pathways, Inc. He's an assistant professor of emergency medicine at Harvard Medical School and assistant dean of the Office for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Partnership. Dr. Landry received his BS from Prairie View A&M University and his MD from University of Alabama, and completed his residency in emergency medicine at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. In 2010, he earned his MPH from Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health and completed the Commonwealth Fund Fellowship in Minority Health Policy at Harvard University. And in the subsequent year, he was a fellow, Disparity Solutions Center Aetna Fellow in Health Disparities. Currently, he serves on the National Advisory Committee for the Summer Health Professions Education Program of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And in addition, he has clinical interests in research in emergency department utilization trends and disparities in care and quality of care. Dr. Landry is also the lead instructor of a course at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health and teaches cultural competency to residents. Dr. Stephanie Mueller is a clinician investigator within the Division of General Medicine at Brigham and Women's Hospital and an assistant professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School, where she works as a hospitalist and conducts research on hospital-based care transitions. Dr. Mueller completed her medical training at the University of Massachusetts, followed by internal medicine residency and chief residency at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center here in Boston. She pursued fellowship training at the Harvard General Medicine Fellowship, where she earned a Master of Public Health prior to joining faculty at Brigham and Women's in 2012. Dr. Mueller is a nationally recognized expert in hospital-based care transitions with grant-funded research focused on improving the quality and safety of inter-hospital transfers. In addition to her research activities, Dr. Mueller has a strong passion for mentoring and faculty development, and she serves as a faculty development director of programs for the Brigham and Women's Department of Medicine and associate director of clinical research and director of mentorship and promotion for the Brigham and Women's Hospital Medical Medicine Unit, where she won an Excellence in Mentoring Award. She's associate director of the Harvard Brigham Research Fellowship in Hospital Medicine and former faculty co-chair of the HMS Joint Committee on the Status of Women. Dr. Mueller is also actively involved in the Society of Hospital Medicine, where she has served as co-chair for the local chapter in the Boston area and is chair-elect of the research committee. With that, I'd like to now turn this over to Drs. Landry and Mueller. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Reed, for the introduction, and thank you to everyone joining us this morning to have this discussion around imposter syndrome. I'm sure this is what everyone wants to talk about at 9 o'clock in the morning on Friday. But we are here and we're glad to be in this space. Dr. Mueller and I will both present slides, but when we're presenting our slides, this is actually meant to be more of a conversation than a lecture. So this is going to be a little bit different than probably what you are anticipating. We're not going to be here just presenting all the options, although Dr. Mueller has some wonderful slides that are really going to help you think about imposter syndrome and sort of process this from your individual perspective and also from a systematic perspective. And then we really want to have a dialogue with you. So the presentation is going to be broken down into 3 parts. First, I'm going to do the setup. Then Dr. Mueller is going to give her presentation, which is really drilling down into how you can address the imposter syndrome that you may be dealing with. And then lastly, we want to have an honest conversation and dialogue about your questions and what our thoughts are related to imposter syndrome. And then more importantly, what HMS and our institutions can be doing to help you to be a better, whatever you are, to perform better in your role. Dr. Mueller, do you think that's a fair description of how the morning's going to go, or at least the next hour and so?
Absolutely. We're excited to be here with you and to start this conversation.
All right. So with that, I am going to go ahead and share some slides. And I know that Dr. Reed mentioned that the presentation is recorded and we're going to be have a conversation related to imposter syndrome. But the reality is I need you all to join in this discussion. Otherwise, it's going to be really boring. It's going to be a lot of me talking to you and not actually a lot of you talking to us. And I think there's more value in the conversation if we are all participating in this discussion. I'll share some candid, my candid thoughts and experiences related to this, and hopefully you will so as well. And it's interesting that we're having this conversation, number one, because my boss just gave me a wonderful introduction. And every time I hear my introduction, I feel a little bit overwhelmed by that. And I'll tell you a little bit as to why. So just to give you a quick understanding of the direction, we're going to go very, very simple, high level objectives. We're going to define imposter syndrome. We're going to explain its impact. And then we're going to develop some strategies to address it. And I think I already addressed this earlier. So really not going to differ much from these objectives. But I think the biggest thing is this is going to be a audience-driven presentation as opposed to a moderator or panelist-driven discussion. So I would like to say that I'm an imposter, or at least I suffer from imposter syndrome. I deal with imposter syndrome. Part of this stems from the fact that, we're in academic medicine and, I get all these fancy titles. We've worked so hard to get to where we're at, whether it's the process of being a pre-medical student going into medical school, the competition that goes along in medicine, and to get to a strong residency program, and then just surviving in academic medicine. As you heard Dr. Reed mention, I have a ton of fancy titles that go along with that. And yet and still, I oftentimes feel like an imposter, and it's a really uncomfortable, visceral feeling, and it can be nagging. And it can weigh me down. And it has actually led to me having some sleepless nights, including, interestingly enough, last night I got some really great feedback about a project I'm working on. I got some great feedback. And then I had to give this presentation on imposter syndrome. And one of the things that I did last night is, after I got this great feedback about this project and the potential for moving forward with it, I started to self-doubt right away. The excitement was there. I was motivated. I was like, oh, this is great. And then I wake up this morning and I start to question everything about the project. How did I get it? How is it moving forward? Maybe there wasn't a lot of competition for the project in the first place, and started just dismissing all the work that I had done. And if you hear a little bit of yourself in that, then you too may be suffering from imposter syndrome. But I think before we get too much into, oh, yes, we all have imposter syndrome, let's really talk about what is imposter syndrome. And so if you all want to take advantage of the chat, or maybe drop a comment, or even unmute yourself and say, give us a definition of what is imposter syndrome. I'm not looking for the definition that you all would see if you were to turn to some journal article, or what you would see if you were to Google this or look this up in the dictionary. But drop in the chat, maybe unmute yourself or raise your hand and say, what is imposter syndrome, or at least what it is to you? So I see someone commenting, feeling like a fake, like you don't fit in, like you don't deserve the position that you're in, a lack of self-confidence, questioning your worth in society or your institution, falling short of your peers. And I guess that's that whole comparison of ourselves to each other, feeling that you have nothing in common with your smart colleagues. Yes, yeah. I think a lot of this is going to come out as a lot of the comparisons that we do with our peers, whether that's justifiable or not, but that is something that we definitely do. Feeling like you snuck in to whatever group. I feel that one because, you know, you're in a room and you look around and you're like, wow, some smart people in here. How did I get in? Questioning your abilities, feeling like the fear of being exposed, questioning your ability after you reach the goal. It's interesting because I like that one. And I'll talk when I do this presentation and have conversations with medical students or pre-meds. You know, one of the spaces that we often go to is they're in the room, they're in their class, they just started medical school and they feel like an imposter. And then I ask them, well, who took the MCAT for you? Or who wrote your personal statement? Or who did all of those hours during the summer in the research lab, or volunteered, or did all of those experiences? And they realize, oh, well, maybe I am feeling like an imposter, but I don't necessarily need to because I've already achieved the goal and I've gotten here. Fear of being discovered as a fraud or a fake. Yep. And waiting for the approval of others to validate your professional qualities. I think this is great. And thank you all for sharing. And I know it's interesting because we're in this room and we're all high functioning individuals. We've achieved a lot. We're professionals and we are in this major academic center and we're doing all this great work and we're, you know, addressing, health and wellness of communities and of our patients. We're leading research projects. We're leading labs. We're leading departments. We're leading parts of the hospital. We're doing all these great things. Yet a lot of us feel this imposter syndrome. And I want to appreciate all the definitions or I guess the emotions that are evoked when feeling or expressing how you feel or interpret imposter syndrome. And so it's really feeling as if you're a fake or you're a fraud or a mistake, or you aren't where you're supposed to be, despite your credentials, your lived experiences, and your successes. It's sometimes you hear it called imposter phenomenon or imposterism. You may hear it that way as well. And it was actually originally defined back in the 1970s by some researchers who what they found was they looked at a group of high functioning women, and this is mostly in the business world. And they saw that these women were really high functioning and made it really, really far. And what they found was that those women sort of attributed their success or their position more as luck, or someone had over faith in them despite what their resume showed, and they shouldn't necessarily be there. And these women had actually made significant contributions to the workspace. They were phenomenal in their research that they've done. They received awards. They were highly ranked and well promoted, but they lacked the internalization of their accomplishments. And they attributed their success more to luck or other people's overconfidence in them. Now, I want to clarify, I know we may have some psychiatrists or some psychologists in the room. It's not a mental health disorder. It's not in the DSM-5 criteria, but it actually will lead to some anxiety, and it can lead to anxiety and depression if you let this overwhelm you. So my next question for you all is, when do you all feel imposter syndrome the most? And again, I'm going to turn to the chat. If you want to raise your hand and comment, you can do so, but put in the chat, when do you feel imposter syndrome the most? All right, I see some comments dropping in when your bio is read aloud. Case in point, me with Dr. Reed just reading my bio, and then also hearing Dr. Mueller's bio right after mine. And I'm like, oh, I get to share the stage with her and she sounds amazing. Yet I'm going to be up here having a conversation with her. When job searching, very interesting. Yeah, you're putting yourself out on the market, and then you start to question whether you should be putting yourself out on the market because you may not actually be up to snuff, or you at least think that. When you're looking at the next steps in your career, obviously happens a lot when you think about promotion, when you think about your own career planning, or when somebody asks it. Hopefully, when someone's coming to you and you're genuinely concerned about, what's your next step in your career, that it's someone who's a trusted individual. And when they're asking that, I can see how that can evoke imposter syndrome. When I'm in a room full of NIH researchers, agreed that, I got my MPH, and I can explain to a degree a p-value or a confidence interval, but beyond that, I'm not going to be able to hold my own with a room full of researchers. Giving a presentation, starting a new role, when asked to be the expert in the room, especially when you're around other individuals who may also be experts. Working in the lab and you made a mistake. Yeah. When you're presented with an award during your elevator speech, these are some great comments. Transition points in career. Now, these are all phenomenal. Thank you all for contributing. Reading job descriptions. It's amazing. I want to tackle that one a little bit, because I read these job descriptions and they're looking for someone who has 15 years of experience in this space, and the space has only been around for the past 5 years. And so how can you have 15 years of experience in a space when it's only been around for 5 years? It's not realistic. When you compare yourself to peers and you see that they've done more and they've done better than you, it makes you feel like you where you are by luck. When you're the only person of color in the room of other professionals, that otherism that happens when you feel when your other status comes out plain and clear to everyone in the room. So I often think about imposter syndrome really striking up in a couple of times. So times of transition in new situations, times of competition, and then also something we haven't talked about. And someone just popped in the comment, times of struggle. So when you get somebody who's critical of your work, or you have a failure, or you don't get the award, or you don't get the job that you applied for. So a lot of people feel this way when they're applying for programs, when they're starting a new role, when they're in orientation for that new job, or for new faculty, or for new fellow, when they're starting a residency or a fellowship program. Also, we feel it when we're appointed to leadership roles in our social or affinity organizations within our specialty. You wanted a national election to be, an academy lead, or you're on the society board. And then you start to feel that imposter syndrome, because now you're sitting amongst other individuals who are now, at that same high level. When you win an award is often when people feel it. Oftentimes they feel it when they're about to prepare for an exam. And some of you may remember when you were about to take the GRE or the MCAT, you may have felt some imposter syndrome during that time. And I just want to differentiate. There is a difference between imposter syndrome and test taking anxiety. Those are two different spaces that people operate in, but they can blend and they can overlap. And I just want to say imposter syndrome is a really, really vicious cycle. And we're going to talk about that cycle and how it impacts us before I turn it over to Dr. Mueller. All right, so I have one last question. What are the impacts of imposter syndrome on you? When you have had imposter syndrome, what has been the impact on you? Anxiety and self-doubt. You try fewer things. You don't pursue an opportunity. You don't feel too happy about life. You don't go up for promotion or you wait and wait and wait until you think the CV is perfect, you feel burnout, you feel like your career is stuck or hesitant, and you're hesitant to move forward, you limit yourself, you doubt yourself, you're afraid to try new things, you lose sleep, you have to wait for somebody else to coach you up and tell you to apply for things that you're more than qualified for before you even do so. I'm going to leave this space a little bit because I want you all to think about the impacts on your career of imposters, how imposter syndrome has impacted your career. So I'm gonna sit here and let you wrestle with this one for a minute, because I think it's important that we reflect back on our experiences, and how we've approached our professional growth, and maybe how that imposter syndrome has limited us. Not fighting to make my voice heard. I think that's a good one. Delayed performance, definitely. All right, well, we've wrestled with this one a little bit. I think the big picture is people experience that self-doubt. They underperform, which you all mentioned a lot. And you also mentioned not applying. And it's interesting, you know, someone earlier mentioned about reading the job descriptions and then feeling imposter syndrome and then not applying. Therefore, you don't even know if you would even get the job because you didn't even put yourself out there. You're complacent in the role that you're in, and you don't do the things that it takes to move forward in your career. And you may see your peers moving up, but you're sitting there and you're just, you know, you're stuck in second gear and you're not going anywhere, where your colleagues may be moving forward. And the reality is they may have seen that same job description that you have, but instead of sitting back and not applying because they felt as if they didn't have all of the prerequisites to apply, they just put it out there. And, you know, when you see that, you see other individuals growing and you see other people being successful, and you're complacent and you're underperforming, or you're not performing at your own maximum level, you start to experience some job dissatisfaction. And in that job dissatisfaction leads to us feeling burnout. So I hope you all see that a lot of these things are really tied in together. And one thing that often happens, at least for me, is you reject any positive feedback that may come your way. And I want you to think about that. I want you to think about how you may get that award, you may get that recognition, you may get that nomination, you may be put up to be on that board or in this leadership role, and you reject any of the positive feedback that comes with other people recognizing the hard work that you do, or the amazing efforts that you are putting forward to move your work or others' works or the institution forward. And we reject that positive feedback. So I like to equate this to a famous quote. You know, it's you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. This is oftentimes attributed to his airness, Michael Jordan, but it's actually a Wayne Gretzky quote. It's a hockey quote. But that's the reality, is when you are sitting and you're dealing with imposter syndrome and you look at those job descriptions and you don't apply, you don't compete for the competitive grant, you don't put yourself up for the next leadership role within your department or your institution, you're not taking the shot, you're not betting on yourself. And so that will engender even more imposter syndrome. And so one of the things that I really want to stress is sort of this cycle of imposter syndrome. And some of us are on two different tracks. Some of you may see the tracks and actually realize that depending on the project, it's a both and. I'll tell you where I sit, and then I would love to see, we don't have a poll ready, but I would love to see where you all sit. So you can tell me where you all sit with this cycle of imposter syndrome. So I want everyone to look, and we're going to start off in this top right-hand corner. You get a task, you get something that you're expected to do, right? And I'll give you an example. We're going to walk through a real life example of what happened to Alden Landry when it comes to his imposter syndrome. All right. So there was an announcement for an award. And it's something that the only way you could get the award was through self-nomination. And so I saw the award come through my inbox. And the first thing I did once I saw the title of the email was I hit delete. I didn't open the email. I didn't read the email. I didn't even see if this even applied to me. I just hit delete. And I got that email probably sometime in October, November of that year. And then I had a subsequent email and a subsequent email because they were really trying to make sure that they had a robust amount of applicants. And they wanted to encourage people like myself who may be suffering from imposter syndrome to actually apply for the award. And then at the last minute, I opened the email and I read through and I said, oh, I kind of meet some of these objectives. I do some of this work. This actually may be a good opportunity. But then I started to doubt myself and I said, well, I do this, but do I really do it good? Or, this is my space and my area of expertise, but I know there's people that are better than me. And so I went into this space over here where now after I was self-doubting and I was worrying about the opportunity, I went straight into procrastination mode. And I put off the application until the last minute. And it was one of those situations where you had until 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to submit your application. And I started working on my application maybe the day before, and I probably had everything all buttoned up and I was ready to submit the following day. But even at 11:50, I was debating whether I was going to actually submit my application for this award. And I finally hit the submit button. And then I had to wait. And that was that really uncomfortable space because I procrastinated and therefore maybe didn't actually put in the best work into getting my nomination package together, my self-nomination package together, because I waited so long for it. But to my surprise, I got the award. And so I fell into this accomplishment space. And I felt this brief feeling of relief and joy and happiness. And I got some positive feedback. And then I said, oh man, I just got really lucky. And I started to discount all the positive feedback and question the fact that I had gotten this award and question the fact that they even read my application and they were just looking for someone to just give it to. And they probably didn't have a lot of applications anyway. So they had to give out 30, awards. And I was number 30 because there was only 30 people that applied. And then I started to feel like a fraud when it came to the time that they were going to make the announcement and we were going to have this big ceremony and I was going to receive the award. And again, these are diagnoses that we're not going to touch on because that isn't necessarily where we're leading to with imposter syndrome. It can lead to that, but that is not the space we're going to. But I felt like a fraud. And then for that same award, they asked me to actually give a presentation, which gave me another achievement related task, which sent me right back into the same cycle of feeling like an imposter. So my question is, who like you or like me fall into this procrastination side? Because there's a lot of people who actually fall into the other side of this, where they over prepare, where they get in a task and they get a they have something to do, an assignment of some sort, a grant they have to submit to. And instead of doing what I do, which is procrastinate, they over prepare and they put in tons of effort. They make sure that they have dotted every I, crossed every T, they've proofread it. They've worked on one section for 3 days when it could have taken them 3 hours. They put in all this amazing work and then they get the award and they get the recognition and they feel like they put in a lot of effort, maybe too much effort. And then they discount the positive feedback, despite the fact that they have put in all the work and they have maybe overly invested in something that they didn't necessarily need to do. And again, leads to this same cycle. So if you're a procrastinator, just drop in procrastinator. If you're an over preparer, just drop in over preparer. Sometimes it's both. But tell me where you all are at. I would love to see where you all feel that you are. So I see a lot of procrastinators. I see some people saying a mix of both. And I see some people saying it's a mix. And I agree. There are some things you want to be perfect. You want to get it right. And you feel that overwhelming sense of pressure and you feel anxious about it. And you doubt that you're even qualified to be giving the presentation. So you over prepare. You look up 50 articles for the presentation that's going to last 10 minutes, as opposed to looking up 5 or 10 really nascent articles that are going to help the conversation go. So I can see how there could be both. And I can see how it could depend on the day. Yeah, it may be some days you feel like you're you're gonna wait until the last moment, just because of the world is weighing down on you, and so you just don't have the energy to do it all. And then some days you feel like you need to be, on your game at all times, and you over prepare. All right. Well, with that, we are going to transition to this next part of the discussion. And this is when I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Mueller, and she's going to lead the discussion on how do I overcome imposter syndrome. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so Dr. Mueller can take over. Thank you all for your comments, and I'm glad you all were able to open up and share your thoughts in this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alden. Let me get my screen sharing going. And as we get started, you guys are seeing a blank screen right now, I hope. And then,
Yes.
Okay, now you can see my cover slide.
Yes, we can.
Okay, talk about imposter syndrome. I get imposter syndrome when we do technology. So before we get started, that was such a fantastic discussion, Alden, and I hope that this discussion continues. I'm going to make a couple of kind of caveats as we get started. So first is just another example of like literally occurrences syndrome of this imposter syndrome cycle, a personal example that I can share. So same thing, I'm definitely a procrastinator when it comes to nominating myself or submitting research or whatnot. And I had a last minute research abstract submission to this national conference that's actually ongoing this week that I participate in. Literally submitted it with about 15 minutes left on the submission time period. This was back in the fall. It happened to be accepted, and it was accepted as a research poster finalist. And then in this kind of virtual world that we live in now, I had to upload the poster and upload sort of the spiel that I do with the poster. And then I just found out on Tuesday that it won an award. So I won the Research Poster Award, which is great. So I had that whole cycle, felt that immediate relief and was feeling excited, and then immediately started to doubt myself. I said, this is a virtual conference. There weren't that many research posters probably or research abstracts that were submitted this year. They were sort of, choosing from the bottom of the barrel. That's sort of how I explained it to myself in my head. But I made a concerted effort to overcome that. And what I did is I forwarded the announcement of my award winning to my division chief and to my section head of hospital medicine to try to sort of amplify, because my inclination was to minimize, right, my accomplishment. And that's what I was sort of doing within my own head. And I made a concerted effort to overcome that and to really highlight my achievement and to do that self-promotion. And I think this is where imposter syndrome can affect us all. And I think I'm going to talk about some strategies here, but it really does take a concerted effort to overcome our like natural inclinations related to this topic. So I'm going to go through several strategies here that we can use to overcome imposter syndrome. And this is a little bit more kind of tool-based. I kind of consider this a bit of a toolkit. I've got some homework assignments included in here. Please interject with chats. It's harder for me to view chats. So Alden, I'm going to ask you to like interrupt me if people have kind of comments that that need to be shared with the group. And then we'll definitely leave plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. So the way that I've broken this up is individual strategies that we can use to overcome imposter syndrome. So these are things that we can do ourselves to really work to kind of overcome this sense of being an imposter. And then I've also highlighted some systemic strategies that I think are also important. So the 4 individual strategies I'm going to go through are what I call stop the social media phenomenon, 1 down versus 1 up, which I'll explain in a minute, to be prepared and to work on highlighting your strengths, and to stop apologizing unnecessarily. And I'll go through each of these in more detail. But as I mentioned, I think it's also important to focus on sort of the systemic strategies. So what exists in our culture that really contributes to our sense of imposter syndrome. So recognizing these contributors to imposter syndrome, diversifying the workplace, and the importance of hearing things from different perspectives. And I'm going to tell you about a tool that you may have already heard about called amplification, which can help with this. So let's get started. So first, talking about our individual strategies for overcoming imposter syndrome. So I call this stop the social media phenomenon. This is something, we've all experienced. We're all, maybe not, but most of us are on social media. We might be looking at, a picture of something and see sort of this perfect vision of a family or whatever it is. And then immediately we're comparing ourselves to that picture that we're seeing on the social media account. And then we feel like we're not kind of living up to that kind of level of perfection that we're seeing on a regular basis. So this is really, this is a well-known phenomenon, right? This is especially in an area like adolescent medicine. The social media phenomenon has been known to contribute to anxiety and depression in adolescence. I certainly have felt this myself, like looking on my, Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and seeing sort of this perfect family picture. And then I see my kids like arguing and like wrestling on the floor with each other. And I'm like, well, why aren't my kids as perfect as this? So what does this have to do with imposter syndrome? Well, I think this same phenomenon happens in our workplace. And Alden alluded to this in his talk, but we see our colleagues and our peers and we think, like, wow, they really have it all together. They're smart, they're dedicated, they're organized, they have earned their position here. And I'm not nearly as smart or organized or whatever it is that they are. So therefore I am the imposter. But the problem is what we're doing is we're really only seeing what people are presenting to us, right? It's the same issue that exists in social media. We have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. We don't know how anxious they're feeling, what other stressors they have going on. Very likely they feel like an imposter themselves. So, just listening to Alden give his talk, I listened to his intro as well. And I'm like, wow, he's got it all together. And then to hear him talk about his sense of imposter syndrome, this is something that is way more common than we think, sort of across the board. So we need to really reframe our thinking and recognize that we don't know what's going on behind the scenes with people. We don't know how other people are feeling. And so we need to stop comparing our insides to others' outsides. And then we can use this to sort of reframe our sense of being an imposter. So next time that you're sort of comparing yourself, particularly to a peer at work, which is where imposter syndrome tends to crop up, just think to yourself, I am comparing my insides to that person's outsides. I don't know what's going on with them behind the scenes. I don't know, what else that they have going on in their life. I don't know how anxious they're feeling, inside their minds, just like I'm feeling inside my mind, and use that to try to reframe your thinking and stop that comparison. Okay, moving on to tool number 2. So I call this the one down versus one up approach. So for better or worse, we have this hierarchical structure in medicine, right? So you start off as a medical student, you move on to an intern, junior resident, senior resident, fellow, junior attending, junior faculty member, and then senior faculty member. And this is true even in, in the non-clinical medical career. So, within sort of the research career as well. And I think with this hierarchy, we always tend to be focused upward, right? It's kind of a natural thing to be focused on what the next step is. So we're always sort of looking ahead. And I think because of this, we tend to always view ourselves from the perspective of those at like one station above us. Because we're, as a medical student, as an intern, and as a resident, you're sort of reliant in some ways on the feedback and the reviews and whatever from your superiors. It's like a natural thing is to always be viewing yourself from the perspective of those on like a ladder higher than you on this hierarchical structure. So I'm going to tell you an anecdotal story of when I was a junior attending, and how this comparison of how I was viewed from those more senior really led me to feel like I was an imposter. So this was my maybe first or second year on faculty. And I was participating as a faculty teacher for a longitudinal Harvard medical student course that kind of ran throughout the course of the year. And we had a group of about 7 to 10 medical students. I was one of the faculty sort of teachers of this course, along with 2 other faculty members. The 2 other faculty members happened to be much more senior than me. Both also happened to be white men. And immediately I was started comparing myself, right, to this more senior people. And I had the sense of being an imposter. Like, who am I to be teaching these Harvard medical students? I'm a first or second year faculty member. I'm working with these other faculty members who have been in practice for 20 plus years. What do I have to bring to the table? To add to this, during sort of the course of the academic year, I became pregnant with my second child. And I knew I was going to be missing out sort of on the end of the course because I was going to be out on maternity leave. So this completely added to my sense of an imposter syndrome. Not only am I, not bringing as much clinical experience to the table and teaching these medical students, but now I'm kind of, piecing out to go on maternity leave, and so I'm not fulfilling my obligation. And this, again, I was viewing myself from the perspective of how I thought the more senior faculty members were going to be viewing me. So throughout the course of the year, I became friendly with the other faculty members. They both happened to be, fantastic, great people and great sponsors and just really, down to earth people. And I was talking with one of them about sort of that feeling, particularly about the feeling of feeling like I was going to be disappointing the group or disappointing them by going out on maternity leave. And this is something that I definitely struggled with at that time. And he gave me a really great piece of advice, which is, think about how the medical students are seeing you. Look at it from their perspective. You are a junior faculty member. You're starting off a fantastic career. You've got a great research position at a great hospital. You just completed your training, and you're starting your family at the same time. Like, in their perspective, you've got it all, right? You have it all together. And that was a really great trick that I still use to this day, and especially within the hierarchy of medicine, is viewing things from different perspectives, right? I think we tend to view ourselves from this perspective of those ahead of us, or those sort of like one up from us, our leaders, or up on the academic ladder. And I think if we view ourselves from the perspective of those more junior than us and how they might see us, that helps to reframe the thinking about ourselves. So this brings us to my first homework assignment for you. I'm going to go through all of these at the end as well. But I want you each to think about somebody that's more junior than you, that you work with on a regular basis. It could be either sort of, a resident that you're working with, or a medical student, or a high school student who's interested in going into a career in the medical field or whatnot. And do a thought exercise and think about how, like, objectively, really objectively, how that person views you. And then I want you to write down 3 positives about yourself that you could envision that person thinking about you. And again, this helps us to, this is like going back to those old Saturday Night Live skits. I don't know if anybody is familiar with those, when when the guy was standing in the mirror and he's like, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. It's a joke thing, but I think it really does help to just view things from other people's perspective and to write these positive things down about yourself. Okay, moving on to our third tool in our toolkit, again, for our individual strategies of how to overcome imposter syndrome. And this is highlight your strengths and be prepared. So I think somebody mentioned in the chat function when we had our earlier discussion about feeling like an imposter every time you did your elevator pitch. So I don't know how many of you know about the elevator speech, but I've participated in several leadership programs, and I think every leadership program out there talks about the importance of having an elevator speech. So what is an elevator speech? It's a short, very kind of concise 1 or 2 sentences that you can use to tell people about yourself, what you do for a living. And the term elevator speech sort of refers to sort of the short amount of time that you might have with somebody if you happen to run across somebody in an elevator. And they talk about it a lot in leadership courses because it's really important for things like networking. Like if you're at a medical conference and you're with your mentor and then they introduce you to somebody that has a sort of similar career interest or does the same type of research or does the same type of clinical medicine or something that you do, you want to be able to tell them about yourself in a short, succinct way, but that also sort of conveys your strengths. So the goals of an elevator speech, again, are to explain what you do to another person. You want to engage your listener. You want to highlight your strongest attributes, and you want them to remember you. So again, what does this have to do with imposter syndrome? Well, this practice of self-advocacy and practicing self-advocacy can help to mitigate imposter syndrome. And it can do this in a couple of ways. So first, just by preparing your elevator speech, it forces you to focus on your strongest attributes, which kind of similar to that one down approach that I was talking about. It helps you to reframe your thinking about yourself. Again, when you're working on this, you're going to be focusing on the things that you're most proud of about yourself. And then it just reminds you that you really are awesome. You really do deserve to be in the position that you're at. And then the second is that the more that you use the elevator pitch in practice, the more confident that you can become about your station in the workplace. And that can really help to mitigate the feelings of being an imposter in that space. So now I want everybody to freeze just for a second, close your eyes, and look at how much space you're occupying in the room. Are you kind of curled up? Are your legs all crossed? Are you crunched in on yourself? What is your body position right now? Do another thought exercise where you're thinking about what's your body position when you're talking to somebody at a meeting, when you're telling somebody about yourself, either when you're doing the elevator pitch or when you're making a statement at some, faculty conference or something like that. Do you look like this? Arms crossed, legs crossed, kind of curled up on yourself? This is what we call a low power pose. Or do you look like this? I mean, maybe not exactly like this, like standing like a, superwoman or something, but, are you taking up space in the room when you talk? So taking up space with your body is also a sign of pride and of confidence. And if you look at images of people winning at the Olympics, without fail, they're in this like victory pose, right? Their arms are up, arms are out, and that's a sign of confidence. That's a power pose. So body language is also an important self-advocacy skill to practice. You can have the best elevator pitch in the world, but how you say something and your body language that you use when you're talking is as important as what you say. Again, if you have that the speech, but you say it in a really soft, quiet voice, or you're sort of, your body language conveys that you don't have a lot of confidence, that's going to come across almost more than the words that you say. So you can practice power posing. There is some data, it's a little bit kind of controversial, but there's some data to suggest that practicing power posing actually changes your body chemistry and sort of can help to create more confidence in yourself. So this is something that I learned a couple of years ago, and I do this sometimes still to this day, particularly before giving like a big talk at a national conference or something like that. So for 2 minutes or some amount of time, before giving some lecture or going to a meeting or meeting with your boss about negotiating for salary or anything where you might be feeling a lack of confidence or a sense of where you might be feeling like an imposter in a particular situation, you can do these power poses. So stand up like this woman on the right or on the woman on the left, lean forward, just practice these power poses for a couple of minutes. And while you're doing that, sort of remind yourself of all of your strengths and all of your attributes and why you deserve to be there. And then you'll go into that meeting or to that presentation with that kind of confident mindset. And that can help to overcome that sense of an imposter. So homework number 2 for you. Number 1, write or prepare an elevator pitch. There's different types of elevator pitches too, depending on like if you're meeting somebody for the first time or if you're kind of re-meeting somebody, you want to remind them about your accomplishments. But write an elevator pitch, practice it with a friend, get feedback. It's really like, this is again, something that I've done in several leadership courses, and it feels weird, but it's good to have that in your kind of toolkit. Like if you're meeting with somebody, again, at a medical conference or something like that, take note of your body position. So we're sort of in this virtual world right now, so it's a little bit less important, but in addition to your body position, if you're talking on a Zoom meeting or whatnot, just kind of keep note of what the tone of your voice is and, speaking loudly or with confidence or whatnot. And practice power posing. It feels weird, but it's kind of fun to do. And it's, it's just another thing that you can use to give yourself confidence before going into something that you might feel less confident about. All right, our 4th and last individual tool that we're going to talk about. Stop apologizing unnecessarily. So this is something that I think particularly people, this is known to happen with women. It's also known to happen with other marginalized groups like people of color, people that feel more like their voices are less heard or less valued in the workplace. We tend to apologize unnecessarily. And I'm going to give you a specific example. I do this. This is something I needed to have a concerted effort not to do. So we're going to dissect an email that I sent recently. So I've got a couple of leadership positions in my role right now, and this is a recent email that I sent. So again, something I'm still fighting with to this day is not apologizing unnecessarily. And this, just to give you the context of this email, I was emailing somebody who I work with, who's sort of, I'm not exactly their boss, but I'm directing this person in several of our kind of faculty development initiatives. And so this is an email I was sending to him about sort of rearranging our meeting time. So I said, hi, John. Yes, I'm sorry I'm out of office this week, though I'm still doing this 3 p.m. meeting with Tara and Ellen. It'd be great to reschedule our 4 p.m. meeting for next week. Does Tuesday at 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. work for you? Either works for me. Thanks. I'll plan to review the analyses that Christina sent in advance of that meeting for our review. I'll also be able to discuss with you and Maria the plans for tracking and prepping this Distinguished Clinician Award. So probably best to divide their times into 30-minute sections so they can join respectively for the first half hour or last, depending on their preferences. Let me know. Thanks. So overall, not a bad email, right? I think it's a pretty nice email. But let's dissect this a little bit. Where the tone of my email? First, I say sorry here. This is an unnecessary apology, right? I'm out of office. We are allowed to be out of office. It's okay. I don't need to apologize for it. I explain here that I'm still doing this other meeting, even though I'm out of office. John doesn't need to know this. This is an over explanation. I do this all the time. And, you know, oh, I have to leave early. And then I go into this long spiel about why I have to leave early. I don't need to do that. I can just say I have to leave early today. Passive language. It would be great to reschedule our meeting. Unnecessary accommodation. So I'd say, does next Tuesday at 3 or 4 p.m. work for you? Either works for me. I think it's implied that either works for me, right? Because I already offered those 2 times. It's probably best. Another passive language. Let me know. Again, unnecessary accommodation. Now you might argue that some of these are just kind of niceties and stuff, but I took a stab and I rewrote this email. And I'm going to show you how I think the tone can still hold true while you still maintain a more assertive and less passive tone of voice. So this is me rewriting this email. Hi, John. Yes, I am out of office this week. Let's reschedule our 4 p.m. meeting for next week. Does next Tuesday at 3 or 4 p.m. work for you? I'll plan to review the analyses that Christina sent in advance of that meeting for our review. I will also be able to discuss with you and Maria the plans for tracking and prepping the Distinguished Clinician Award. Let's divide their time into 30-minute sections so they can join respectively for the first half hour or last, depending on their preferences. Thanks, Steph. Now, again, I would argue that this is still a nice email. The tone is not, you know, it doesn't come across sort of overly curt or you know, too directive. It's still a nice email, but it takes out some of that unnecessary apology, that unnecessary passivity, and that unnecessary over-explaining. So homework number 3, review some recent emails for yourself, look for unnecessary apologies, unnecessary passive language, over-explanation of something, and then do that same exercise that I just did with you, where rewrite your email in a more confident tone. And you can also review this. You can do this with a buddy and read it for each other to see, you know, what you think. All right, we're going to shift gears for our last section here and talk about some systemic strategies that we can use to, or that we need to address, I think, when we're talking about the concept of imposter syndrome. And, you know, I think it's an important thing to recognize these kind of cultural contributors to imposter syndrome and the historical perspective of this concept. So as Alden mentioned at the, you know, during his talk, imposter syndrome was initially described back in the 1970s. And this is sort of the original kind of article that described it from 1978. And it was originally described in these high-powered women in the workplace, where they said that these women, despite their earned degrees, scholastic honors, high achievement on standardized tests, praise, professional recognition from colleagues and respected authorities, these women do not experience an internal sense of success. They consider themselves to be imposters. So that's where this kind of concept originally started. So let's talk about some problems with this concept of imposter syndrome. So first, it's old, right? It was first described over 40 years ago. Obviously, that doesn't mean that this concept doesn't still hold true. It obviously still holds true. We're here talking to you about it today. But when it was first described, it was a different world, right? And 40 years ago, it was a different world. The workplace was much less diverse than it is today. Secondly, and I think maybe most importantly, it kind of places the onus or the blame of the imposter syndrome on the individual. So it's saying you are the one who's feeling like an imposter. Now, again, I don't want to discount that we all have to do practice those individual tools or strategies to work on overcoming our sense of imposter syndrome. I think that those are important. But by solely placing the blame on the individual, it avoids accounting for kind of the historical and cultural context of why people feel imposter syndrome, and the fact that currently imposter syndrome is disproportionately experienced by traditionally marginalized groups, right? Women, people of color, etc. And I think the reason why is because these groups tend to experience more bias, more microaggressions, more macroaggressions within the workplace that completely contribute to this sense of imposter syndrome. And so by solely focusing on individual strategies, it discounts this whole other piece of contributors to imposter syndrome. So we need to be able to devote efforts to fixing what's wrong with our system, with our culture, in order to support all individuals and create a sense of belonging for all individuals, rather than just focusing on the individual efforts that I talked about. So this concept has gained more traction. I don't know if anybody saw this, but this was a recent article that came out in the Harvard Business Review just a couple of months ago in February. And they talk about women here, but I think that could be expanded to all groups. Stop telling women they have imposter syndrome. And they kind of go over some of those same kind of concepts that I just mentioned. So what are some systemic strategies that we can use to employ or to address imposter syndrome? We need to diversify the workplace is number one, biggest, most foremost, most important thing that we can do to start addressing imposter syndrome. So I don't know how many people recognize this room, but this was the Bornstein Auditorium at Brigham and Women's, and this is where our grand rounds and other sort of major medical conferences are held. And until about 2 years ago, this is what this room looked like. It was filled with portraits of white men who had been historical leaders in the hospital. And literally every single picture in the room was of a white man. So there are two problems with this. First, where's the diversity, right? There's no diversity in hospital leadership. We need to have more diverse leaders to be able to contribute to a sense of belonging for all. So if all you see in your workplace or in your community are white men as leaders, then of course, if you are not a white man, this is going to contribute to your sense of feeling like an imposter. The second problem with this is it reinforces this lack of diversity. So having these portraits up on the wall not only demonstrates this historical lack of diversity in leadership, but it also doesn't apologize for it, right? It's this hidden message of, maybe not celebrating it, but at least not being embarrassed by it. So it shows that it's okay. And just think about who's more likely to feel like an imposter sitting in this room. So after what really started as some grassroots efforts with some of employees in the hospital, which finally reached and got buy-in from hospital leadership, the portraits were removed. And so this is what Bornstein Auditorium looks like today. Now, the portraits were not tossed in the trash. These were still sort of historical leaders of the hospital, but they were just redistributed to the particular departments or division where these individuals had worked during their careers, so that they were not all concentrated in one space with the effect of highlighting this lack of diversity. So I think that, most people, and I talked with a lot of people about this just in this sort of, roles that I have, most people were in support of this move, but there was definitely about this, as you can imagine, because with any progress comes backlash. There was even controversy sort of within our own home institution. So our former dean of Harvard Medical School tweeted this, and this is publicly available. I'm not trying to shame anybody, but this is a great discussion for those of you that are on Twitter. I welcome you to look up this tweet and look at the whole discussion that happens, because there's a lot of, back and forth discussion. And I think it's important to sort of recognize where other people are coming from when they're disagreeing with this. So Dean Flyer said, when I last lectured at Brigham and Women's, the walls were adorned with portraits of prior luminaries of medicine and surgery, connecting to a glorious past. Now all are gone. I hope everyone's happy. I'm not. Neither were those that I asked who were afraid to say it openly. Sad. So, obviously Dean Flyer is not the only person that felt this way. People felt like we were sort of erasing our historical past and the luminaries of the past. But I just want to highlight this one area that he says. He said that he asked other people who were also felt similarly to him. But my question is, who did he ask? Who did he talk to about this? So if you look at some of the replies that kind of came out on Twitter about this, I'm going to highlight just a couple. So this first one came from Dr. Evan Shannon, who I know very well. I'm actually his research mentor. He's also the current chief medical resident at Brigham and a fantastic researcher and clinician and person. And you can see his response to former Dean Flyer. The portraits aren't gone. You can still find them in the respective departments, like I mentioned. For each person unhappy about this, could find a non-white male patient or employee for whom the portraits made them feel unwelcome at our hospital. There are better ways to celebrate the luminous past. So a very, I think, appropriate response. And I would like to highlight, again, finding a non-white male patient or employee, hearing things from other people's perspective. Just to highlight sort of one more response from this, this was actually came from Dean Flyer's daughter, who also sort of disagreed with her father. And in some other sort of tweet replies, she sort of mentioned that the people that he had spoken to were similar to him in terms of his station in life and his demographics, and also sort of highlighted the importance of the need to talk to people who have different perspectives than your own. So this is our third tool, right? You need to hear things from different perspectives in order to sort of address the systemic issues that go to contributing this sense of imposter syndrome or this lack of belonging. This is one of my favorite graphics here, seeing things from different perspectives. So how do you get your perspective heard? So I think if you're in a leadership position, I think the onus is on you really to do that work, to hear things from different perspectives. Like that's just part of your role in any leadership position you have. But if you're not in a leadership position and you want to make sure that your perspective is heard, how do you get it heard? So this is a tool that I love. I talk about a lot, amplification. And so I think more people have heard about this tool. But when I first started talking about it, it was sort of new. So it first kind of actually came to light during the Obama administration. And it was a strategy that Obama's women staffers used to make sure that they were being heard during staff meetings. Because they just were noticing that they were sort of being overspoken a lot and whatnot. But the tool is, essentially, if you're at a meeting or at a conference, if you say something, or if you want your voice heard, you say something and you buddy up with somebody else, you have your buddy repeat exactly what you said and also give credit to you with that statement. So let's say I'm at a staff meeting and I said, I really think we need to change our clinic schedule around so that we're not, working every other Wednesday or something like that anymore. And then Alden, who I've buddied up with, can then repeat that and say, yeah, I think that Steph really has a great point when she says that we need to change the clinic schedule around. I agree, and here's why. And let's have Steph tell us some more about what she's thinking. So by Alden restating what I said, he's amplifying my idea, amplifying my voice, but he's also giving me credit, right? He's telling everybody, let's hear more about Steph's idea. So giving me credit. And I think that both of those pieces are really important for amplification. And so this brings us to our final homework. At your next meeting, conference, class, whatever it is, and this can happen over Zoom just as easily as it can happen in person, amplify the voice of one of your peers. And this is something you could either do without buddying up, without a plan to do it with somebody, or you could choose a buddy to do this with. And again, repeat their idea and give them credit for that idea. So this is sort of the end of my planned speech, and I'd love to open it up for some open discussion with everybody. But again, these are the 7 strategies that I went through, the 4 individual strategies: stop the social media phenomenon, the 1 down versus 1 up, be prepared, highlight your strengths, and stop apologizing unnecessarily. And then the 3 systemic strategies I went through: recognizing the contributors and the underlying kind of cultural issues going on in our society that contribute to imposter syndrome, diversifying the workplace and stop reinforcing lack of diversity, and hearing things from different perspectives. And you can use that tool of amplification to make sure that your perspective is heard. And I will leave these 4 homework assignments up. And I welcome feedback or thoughts or other tools that people have used to overcome imposter syndrome themselves.
Hey, Sarah. Hey, Stephanie. There was a comment that came earlier during your presentation. It was about posting on social media, and some people want to use that as a way to actually combat their own imposter syndrome by promoting their successes, as opposed to hiding them. So any thoughts on that?
I am a huge proponent of that, and I talk about that a lot. I am new to Twitter, and I don't use it super effectively, but so my personal example of winning that poster award competition, I've been more active on Twitter this week because of this conference that's going on, so we use Twitter a lot. And so I tweeted about it, and I think that this is something that another thing that we need to do, have a concerted effort to do, because it feels, when you're feeling like an imposter, doing those things for self-promotion are really, really hard, right? Like to be able to sort of like toot your own horn, or whatever the expression is, like to be able to share that on social media, share it with your superiors, with your boss. But I think this is something we need to be purposeful about, and really work more to highlight those achievements in ourselves. The other thing that I've heard people do that has been really effective, if it's particularly hard for you to do that self-promotion, I've heard of kind of self-promotion buddies, where you buddy up with a friend and you say, and you sort of have an agreement that you're going to tell each other about your accomplishments, and then your friend essentially is the one to post on social media and like tag you in it, or forward your your journal publication or your award that you got or whatever it is to your boss, and be like, look at the great stuff that Steph did, and so that might feel easier for people. I still am a proponent of doing it ourselves, because I think, the other thing that we have to be, that I talk about with kind of a different version of this talk, is being mindful of the implicit biases that we all carry that are out there, and how things like self-promotion are perceived differently when they come from different people. And so I just want to acknowledge that. But I think the more that we do that as kind of more people that tend to feel imposter syndrome or do it less frequently, I think the more it'll normalize it, so I'm still a big proponent of doing that self-promotion ourselves.
I like it.
All right, I'm reading through some chats here. Teresa, what do you do when you give a good idea in a meeting, there's no feedback, 2 minutes later, somebody gives the same idea and everyone agrees? Yeah. That's that. I know, we've all been in that situation, right? That's a really difficult thing. So that's where amplification is supposed to come into play to prevent that, right? So that, but when that happens, how do you do that? This is where, people that have done any like microaggression response training, that's a little bit of a microaggression, whether or not that it's intentional or not, is to sort of take somebody else's idea. And so this is where like an upstander, you could stand up for yourself, or have like a buddy upstander be like, oh, I think that Teresa just gave us that idea, and sort of just name that. Teresa, can you help us? Can you like tell us more what you were thinking? Yeah. Also be prepared for the flip side of others being critical. Medicine at times can be critical at times, and it's well-intentioned, but any advice on working through critical feedback and channeling it to empower versus subdue or induce self-doubt? Yeah, can you tell us more what you're thinking there, Shanique?
Yeah, I think that's a great discussion as well. And I'd love to hear a little bit more what you're thinking. And not not to overstep Stephanie, but one of the things that I've tried to do when it comes to taking feedback is not to take it personal, right? Oftentimes when someone is critiquing your work, you assume that they're critiquing you as an individual, as a person, and then you take that home and you feel bad. And that's not actually what's intended to happen there. It's probably just about the work. It may be about the way you phrased, something in the grant or your methodology or something along those lines, but it's not an attack on you. And I think we oftentimes internalize critique, which is meant to be beneficial, to actually taking it as a personal assault on who we are as, humans in society.
Yeah, great. I'm stopping. Thank you for a suggestion to stop sharing my screen so we can see people more. No, I think that's a great point. I think, criticism, especially, I think those of us in the medical field, I think, criticism can be hard, even if it's constructive criticism. I think like we're used to positive feedback, I think to be sort of where we are in life, but to get that sort of constructive criticism can be difficult. And I agree, Alden, that I think we need to not internalize it. I think we also have to review it. Like we've all gotten criticism. I've definitely gotten criticism that I find super valuable, and I've changed practice because of it. And I, after feeling initially sort of hurt and dejected and contributing to my sense of imposter syndrome, I just sit with it for a bit, and then I try to use it to really, better myself. And then sometimes I receive criticism that I just disagree with, and then I just have to sort of discount it.
So one thing I also want to highlight, which Stephanie presented in sort of that pyramid diagram, and then also at the end when she talked about the importance of having, other people to help self-promote you. I think we don't talk enough about the role of mentorship in all of this. And mentorship isn't just about having the person who is the most senior in your room be in your corner, or the person who, has, whether they're bald-headed, they're gray, they have the professor title, they are some, luminary in the field. But your mentors can really help you address your imposter syndrome. And oftentimes it's those near peers, those individuals who may be a step or two above you. And then also your colleagues or your peers. And when you open up and you talk to them about what you're experiencing, they can be the ones that help you sort of think through this process and grow. And we often look at this, career advancement space in a very individualistic approach. And the reality is, we're always working in teams. So I think it's important for us to have mentorship in the form of teams. And so going to your peers, and your peers don't necessarily have to be in the same institution as you. They can be across the country. And with as much as we're doing Zoom and virtual conferences, this is a great way to build your peer network out. Your peers can be those within your division or your department. And then also your peers can just be those, like I said, who's a step or two above you from a career perspective. And you can see a lot of what your potential paths are by talking to them and getting some advice from them, not necessarily comparing yourselves to them, but just helping to learn from their experiences. And I think that's something we need to rely on a lot more, and use to help us overcome imposter syndrome and have more career satisfaction.
Yeah, I almost actually added another tool to our individual strategy, which is to find a good mentor and a good sponsor. And I think there's differences between that, but which I'll mention in a second, but just as like a personal anecdote. So as I was preparing this talk, I'm also like toying with submitting this grant, which I think I don't have enough time for because it's the deadline's like in a couple of weeks. But anyways, I was talking with my mentor, my research mentor, about this grant idea. And I definitely have a sense of imposter syndrome about this grant because it's related to the topic of what I do research on, which I consider myself like pretty knowledgeable about, but it involves like this health IT stuff, and I'm not as knowledgeable about health IT stuff. And so I definitely feel like, who am I to be submitting this grant? I don't, know enough, and I was able, because he's a trusted mentor, to talk with him about that feeling that I had. And he was able to just give me really sound advice and to normalize it and to say, we're not all experts on everything. This is why we have a team when we put in for a grant, so we can have a health IT expert on the grant to do that piece of it. And so having a trusted mentor is huge. and having a sponsor. So, and your mentor might also be your sponsor, or you might have different sponsorship, but a sponsor is a little bit different, where, you know, a mentor is going to help you navigate your career choices and whatnot. But a sponsor is somebody that really uses their own capital to put you up for positions, assignments, you know, whatever. So there's somebody that, you know, really believes in your skills and your strengths, and will kind of back that up by sort of nominating you for awards or positions or whatnot. And I think finding a good sponsor is also, you know, really key.
Yeah. And for those of you senior in the room, in the Zoom room, be a sponsor, especially to individuals who are in these disadvantaged groups, these minoritized groups, women, physicians of color, you know, who don't necessarily often get the bumps and the promotions. And so think about how you can do that. And there's a great comment in the chat that said diversifying and looking for mentors among your near peers is critical, because those who are 2 or 3 decades ahead of you will retire 2 or 3 decades ahead of you. Great point. I guess one of the big questions I have for you all as an audience, and we can try and get some feedback through the chat, or you can open up and talk about this, is really, what can Harvard do to help you address your own imposter syndrome? Because what's the way Stephanie phrased this, you know, it's often we put this on the individual, but in fact, our system, whether it's your institution or HMS itself, can talk how can HMS address this? And you know, these and I ask this question because there's lots of work that's being done to think about the promotion process. There's lots of work that's being done within the departments about how we nominate individuals for awards. And so I'd love to hear what you all are thinking as to how Harvard could help you be a better you and not have suffer from the implications of imposter syndrome.
While we're thinking about that, I just want to address Sarah's comment about discussing fails and how not getting an award, not getting a presentation or promotion or fellowship or whatnot can increase your imposter syndrome. I think that's definitely true. I noticed that when I won this research award this year. I also had asked my sponsor or mentor to nominate me for this other sort of Harvard award that I did not win. And I found that out this week. And so that definitely can increase your sense of being an imposter. I think the things that I try to remind myself, especially now in my faculty development role, I'm on the other side of being on the award selection committee. Use it to renominate yourself. So most often these big awards, people are nominated more than once. So if you're nominated and you don't get it, nominate yourself again next year for sure. So use that as an opportunity to renominate yourself. And I use the same with like applying for positions. It's not necessarily the same as a fellowship, but if you're applying for like a position within your workplace and you don't get it, it's still a good thing that you applied, because then you're showing those people that you are interested in that type of position. So then they will remember your name when the next position comes along. So all applications, even if you fail at them, are doing something to advance your career in that direction, because it puts your name out there. So just try to reframe your thinking about it is something I like to do.
Agreed. I love it.
Yeah.
Harvard and affiliated hospitals can avoid Manels and Manfredses.
Yeah. Also, WANLs. Have you heard that? All white panels and all white conferences. Yeah. So yeah, we need to diversify. And there's something actually called, related to Manels anyways, called the Gender Avenger Pledge. I don't know how many people have heard of it. But it's something that actually men can sign up for, where they are pledging not to speak on a panel that is an all male or an all white panel. And same thing for not participating in a conference. That's the same. And it's popular in like politicians, like I think Joe Kennedy did the Gender Avenger Pledge, and Francis Collins, the head of the NIH, put out a statement against Manels. So yeah, that's something we could do potentially at Harvard, is enforce that more.
Yeah.
Okay, mentoring. So actually Harvard does offer a mentoring workshop. I think it's in November. I think it's in November because I'm talking at it. And I took it actually several years ago when I started mentoring people. So I'm forgetting the name of the course, but it's geared towards learning mentoring skills. I'll try to look it up. Talking about failures and what it takes for people to get where they are. Yeah. Instead of just showing successes and outcomes. That's great. I agree. I think we all need to talk about our failures more. Oh yeah. The Chad mentoring course. That's it. Yeah. November 5th. So for those that are interested in taking a course on mentorship, yeah, that's offered in November. And yeah, I think we all need to talk about our failures more, particularly those in like successful leadership positions. Because I think it, again, and I do this actually the same on my clinical rotation. So I work as clinically as a hospitalist. So I'm working with residents, medicine residents on the wards. And I always talk about mistakes that I've made, because we need to normalize that so that people, you know, aren't afraid to do that. And I think particularly in leadership positions, we need to talk about these things more.
Let's see. So we're going to be wrapping up soon. Are there any other final thoughts or comments that you all have? Because I want to make sure that you all have had a chance to, you know, share your thoughts in the chat, or whether you have questions that you'd like us to try and address before we wrap up. We do have a short poll that we're going to put up in a second, but I do want to share something that I personally enjoy. I enjoy the petty side of Twitter. And so I just want to share with you a couple inspirational quotes that I find from probably the least inspirational place at times, which is Twitter. And so a couple quotes. The fear of failure will have you sometimes masking your procrastination as planning. And I think we talked about this a lot. I'm definitely someone who's a procrastinator, but I don't consider it planning. I just know that I'm procrastinating, but some of you may feel otherwise. Y'all will have imposter syndrome over stuff, but confidently put down proficient in Excel on your resume. And I think this goes to show how we have things that we're confident about that aren't necessarily the things that we should be confident about. You know, we know that we're experts, as Stephanie just mentioned, in the research that we're doing, but we minimize that and we highlight other things that we think that we're actually good at when we're actually not. And then something that I think resonates with part of the presentation that I want us to all just wrestle with a little bit more about our institution is whether you have imposter syndrome, or is it that you just spent much of your life having your knowledge and skills subtly dismissed and devalued. And that comes to those microaggressions and how people who have traditionally been minoritized have been put in positions where they are not respected. So just as take-home points for you all to think about as we are wrapping up. I'll stop sharing. Stephanie, do you have any other final comments or thoughts about imposter syndrome?
No, I think thank you all for sharing in the chat. I know this is, this can be a sensitive topic for us all to talk about because it's vulnerable. So thank you for being open and sharing with us. And yeah, I think, again, the more that we normalize this and address the underlying issues that contribute, as we just talked about, I think, the better we'll be.
Wonderful. So I think Jackie or Ying has a quick poll that they're going to put up, which you all can click through. And we just want to say thank you again for joining us for this portion of the presentation. Again, we know this is a tough topic. It's really awkward trying to have some of these conversations be through Zoom, but I think it's important that we continue to work on this as a extended Harvard family, but then also taking some of these issues back and sort of thinking about the homework that Stephanie put up for us to go over. And so, think about the homework, think about how you're going to support others as a sponsor or championing someone else's ideas. to make sure that they get the limelight, but then also think about yourself and how you're going to boost yourself up, having that elevator speech ready and making sure that you're using your body positioning to show that, you know, that you have the confidence in the work that you do. And I'm sure Stephanie has, well, we can at least figure out a way to share the homework slides for folks to go over as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think this is being recorded. So I think there were some questions in the chat, and maybe Yang said it's being recorded and will be posted on the DICP website. I can also, maybe Yang, I can forward you those 4 homework assignments that can be sent out to the participants as well, if you guys would like that.
All right, wonderful.
Great.
All right, y'all have a good rest of your morning, and enjoy the other sessions that we're having throughout the rest of the day.
Have a great day, everyone.
Take care, everyone.